The gun control argument in this country feels stuck. We go through these terrible mass shootings, which are the ones that drive the sensationalistic conversation in the country, but not necessarily the totality of the, I think, more than 30,000 gun deaths that we have every year. So many of the homicides in this country actually stem from domestic violence cases. In fact, so many of the police shootings in this country stem from domestic violence.
Yes.
Is that a place to start?
Certainly, domestic violence is a place that we can do better. And we do have laws on the books.
The federal law is that if you have a protection order or you have a restraining order or you've been convicted of domestic violence, you cannot own a firearm.
True. Or ammunition.
Or ammunition. But there doesn't seem to be a dissemination of that into local and state level enforcement. That doesn't serve their interests. Why is law enforcement not taking the lead and weeding out bad guys with guns?
I would say that a lot of the obstacles are cultural. Cops today view themselves as warriors who are at battle against evil in society. Mm-hmm. And so they see themselves as crime solvers, or I'm going to come to some situation that already went really bad and clean up the mess. To really be effective in domestic violence, you want crime preventers.
Well, I can tell you, we talked to two women, April Ross and Janet Paulson, who had been shot and paralyzed, both in domestic violence incidents. But Janet's she had a protection order. Her husband had 74 guns. They seized 73 of them. There was one in his truck, and they wouldn't take the one in his truck because they said that's not a part of the protection order. And 5 days later, she was shot by that one gun. In what world is that gun given such constitutional grace and the woman not?
When cops get a call for a domestic call, mm-hmm. the first thing that clicks in their mind...
The most dangerous call they could get, by the way.
And that's important. Some choice has to be made. Am I taking property from you that's rightfully yours, and can I get in trouble if I do that under the wrong circumstances? And you should know with certainty what you can and cannot do at that scene, because that's not the time to figure it out.
Right.
And it's also something you got to be very careful to follow the policy, because you could get in trouble, because we know after the fact people end up getting hurt and then they come back and blame you. This has not been framed as...
So the police feel victimized somewhat by this.
Well, police often quickly turn the lens about, I'm victimized. It's if I take guns, where am I going to store them? What, someone's going to sue me for...
Where am I going to store them?
No, I mean, these are some of the complaints that I received. Like, if we take them, we don't have a place to keep all these guns. And I have to keep them because I might have to give them back and they can't be damaged.
That's terrifying.
As cops, we're human beings who bring all of our biases to the job. Mm-hmm. So if we're a conservative white male and a member of the NRA, you're already in the headspace that gun laws are bad, everyone needs a gun, and good guys will prevail. There's a certain portion of that going on.
But I would say it's not, I think we have a tendency to say, like, okay, a conservative white man, but those aren't the only people that dismiss women's concerns. It's a problem in rural communities. It's a problem in cities, it's a problem in suburbs, and it's all of the same dynamic.
I agree with you. I mean, I agree with how defeating this is.
Right.
And we have to also understand, like, who are the actors making the decision? We know there have been studies done that show that for law enforcement themselves as people, there's higher incidence of domestic violence in their own homes. People don't want to say, like, hey, I had a bad situation in my home that was violent, and I'm worried, like, that person's mad at me, and they could use this law to take away my gun, and if that happens, I lose my job. Like, there are all these other motivations going on.
Right.
There's also this sort of throwing their hands up, saying, like, gun violence is a problem that can't be stopped.
Really?
It's just going to happen. It's part of the cost of doing business. No laws are going to prevent criminals from getting guns. Even if I took that gun, that guy could have gone out and bought another one just that day or built one. Like, there's this frustration. Like,
but then why have any laws?
I can speak from an ATF perspective.
Mhm.
Every year, over 10,000 Americans go into a licensed gun dealer and they lie on the federal form, committing a federal felony that will put them in jail for 5 years because they've already been convicted of a misdemeanor crime of domestic violence, or they're currently on a restraining order. No one does anything.
How many people?
Over 10,000 a year. Okay? So that to me is like bells and whistles should be ringing. Some people would call that, I think pilots call it a near miss. Like, we're lucky,
Mm-hmm.
but it's considered a win, and then nothing's done. It's like, oh, the system worked, it stopped the person, as if that person isn't going to go to a private seller and buy a gun absent the paperwork or background check, or now today just go, well, I guess I'll have to go on the internet and build one. Like, this is a screaming alarm that someone who we already know is at risk of violence and has actually made it into the courts. That doesn't usually happen, right? Like, yet nothing, right? So and why? Because that would be prevention. What's the big crime that it's a paperwork violation, but it's those paperwork violations that can stop someone from getting killed or one of these mass shootings.
Right.
This has not been made a priority. It's this cultural thing, like guns are this totem, they equal freedom, you can't touch them, you can't do anything, and that's just not true. I mean, I think you can do both. I think you can honor the right to have a gun, but also, we have a right not to get shot. And that isn't, in the Constitution.
So you're saying life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Throw it under one. I'm sure a constitutional
doesn't include ducking.
The ATF, this agency that's supposed to deal with gun violence in our whole country, is smaller than the Las Vegas PD. So especially now with domestic terrorism, ATF has so many responsibilities. They have to regulate the entire gun industry, tens of thousands of gun dealers, more than McDonald's locations across the country. And
boy, that's a slogan. Over billions and billions shot.
Well, I mean, last year we sold 20 million guns.
Right.
I think that we just have to start, John was saying, like, gun violence is something we can solve. We're not absent solutions. We
have to start with saying it's a problem. Drunk driving was a problem. So we created programs against drunk driving, and the police would set up drunk driving checks on the streets, right? And you could make the argument, well, that's a violation of the Fourth Amendment. And they did make the argument, and it was controversial, but it passed through.
So it's all about rewards, right? Like, so the federal government would send money to police departments through probably transportation, to pay for overtime for those officers doing that.
So, but we decided as a culture, drunk driving is a problem. Too many people are dying.
It's a problem we're willing to commit to owning and paying for to solve, and there were incentives to be good at it. You got overtime, you're going to be given awards if you catch a lot of people. I mean, it was carrots everywhere. Like, I think that's a model for success.
How do you de-escalate law enforcement resistance? I think it's pretty clear now that the federal approach is probably not the one that's going to be very effective.
We live in an environment where we're not going to pass federal laws. All right. So fighting that fight, even though that, I mean, we're not.
I know.
So, right. So, like,
it's just a funny thing to say out loud. We live in an environment
especially when
now.
your job is trying to advocate, and we do seem, to some degree, able to throw money at problems. Police are strapped in their budgets, and so if you can give funding from the federal government that's coming outside the normal local mechanism and ask them to do programs and priorities, people do what they have the resources to do.
And they don't need legislative approval because the laws already exist.
We have plenty we can do with the laws on the books now. The first thing I ask is, would you have taken the same action as a law enforcement if that woman was your sister?
Right.
Can we personalize it? And that's what we got to encourage police officers to do.
Do you think domestic violence then is not taken as seriously because the culture is sort of trained to not believe women or to dismiss women's concerns? Because it does seem like if this were happening to men, there'd be a far greater outcry.
I think that's a fair criticism. And until that culture is fixed, we will remain broken.
the International Association of Chiefs of Police. You're a part of that organization.
Yes, and I was on their firearms committee, only
Mhm.
25 of this largest organization. I had 2 terms. I wrote most of their materials about gun violence prevention.
The
I've been a
Firearms
member-
Committee is in charge of
all firearms policy for that IACP endorses, and I've been on it. I worked there for
just
a
out
year.
of curiosity. How many women were on that?
1,
How many people are on it?
25, 1 person of color. This is,
One person of color and one woman
yes.
writing the policy for the IACP on firearms. That seems fair.
Yeah, and so IACP is largely now representing small town police chiefs, rural chiefs, major city chiefs, has a very different look. And yes, this is shocking.
But it's clearly a constituency that could make a difference.
Oh,
if
yes.
they came out tomorrow as this is an important initiative that we're going to put a good amount of resource and time to, that would be enormous.